everybody. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining me. Welcome, welcome. Hey, I'm using a new microphone today, so if you can't hear me at any time, just please type in the chat, big letters, I can't hear you, and I'll fix it. I also want to remind you that tomorrow we start my coaching room. This is a 1-hour free coaching interaction with me. You go to my website, ALANCOHEN.com, and there's instructions how to join me. It'll be 1 hour every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, and we'll play and have some fun. I can interact with you directly. You can put your video on or not. You can phone in, you can video in, so whatever you like. So a number of years ago, I lived in a farming community, an organic farming community in upstate New York. And there was a bunkhouse and a main house. And I would sit on the porch of the bunkhouse and watch people walking across the lawn. And we had this little duck named Pete the Duck, and he would sit by the side of the pathway and quack at people as they went by. And so one morning I watched, and there's a lady who's walking by, and she's a professional singer. And as as she passes Pete, Pete goes quack, 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 quack. And she says, "Why, Pete, how nice of you to sing me a morning song." And I thought, how interesting is this that a professional singer sees a duck quacking and she hears a morning song. The next lady to go by was rather overweight. And as she walks past Pete, he goes quack, 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 quack. She says, "Pete, always quacking for more food. Why don't you stick to your diet?" I thought, that's really interesting. And then the next person who walked by was a professional architect, a very intellectual guy. And as he passes Pete, Pete goes quack, quack, quack. And the architect says, "Pete, always asking more questions. How about some answers for a change?" I'm not making this up. This is quite true. So I thought, isn't it interesting that each person brought to their experience their own mind and their own history and their own ideas, their own self-image. So all I saw was a duck quacking. I don't know what that says about me, but that was my vision of what was happening. So there's a very important lesson here, that what appears to be the world out there, or reality, or something that affects us from the outside in, is really a projection of what's going on within us. It's really from the inside out. Now there's another similar story about some cowboys way back in the early 1900s who had gotten hold of their first movie. And they had a little projector and a little film, and they put a sheet up on the wall. And they're showing this movie, and it happened to be a dramatization of some Indians coming up over a hill with war paint, as if they're going to attack settlers. Well, one of the cowboys got so upset when he saw this that he stood up and he took out a 6-shooter and he fired 6 shots into the screen. And everyone laughed, and the lights went on, and the Indians went away, and the cowboys went away, and all there remained was a blank sheet with 6 bullet holes in it. Now, once again, this has tremendous symbolic import, because when we see people and things outside of us attacking us, and we respond with attack, then we're basically shooting holes in the screen. Not to say the stuff doesn't go on, but it's really our perception of what's going on that colors our experience and our response. And a lot of you are Course in Miracles students. The Course in Miracles says that we don't see the world as it is, we see it as our mind is. And there's a famous line from the Course that says, "Seek not to change the world, but choose instead to change your mind about the world." How interesting is that? So is it possible that all the chess pieces we've been attempting to manipulate outside of us are really reflections of the chess pieces in here, where the real manipulation needs to occur before any change can occur out there? And I like the analogy of a chessboard, because you let's say you have a stagnant or recurrent pattern in your life. Let's say you meet the same kind of men, the same kind of women, they have the same kind of job and the same kind of prosperity, and no matter what you do with your money, it ends up in the same position. Well, imagine you're playing chess with somebody, and all the pieces have a little magnet underneath them. And let's say every time you put the queen in a certain position, she pops back to the original position. No matter how you try to rearrange the chess pieces, they keep springing back, like with a rubber band, to where they were. And then you look underneath the plastic pieces, and you see that each one has a little magnet on it. And then you look below the table, below the chessboard, and you find that there's a configuration of strong magnets in a particular pattern. And those magnets keep flipping those little plastic pieces into the pattern that matches the strong magnets underneath it. So it's almost useless to try to move those little pieces because it's the magnet below the table that is determining where those pieces end up. Now, this is the best psychology because we all have programs and beliefs and attitudes in our subconscious that keep flipping external stuff back into the position where it started. Now, this can work for us, against us. If you have a loving, positive attitude about yourself, and you believe in prosperity, and you believe in relationships, then you're going to attract prosperity and health in relationships that match your internal configuration. Freud said that the conscious is but 10%. It's like an iceberg. Your conscious mind is just a very small portion, and your subconscious or unconscious rules a lot of what happens in the conscious world. And so at some point, you have to start withdrawing your attention from trying to make things happen in that small percentage of conscious and start working with the subconscious so you can recreate some of those patterns. How do you do that? Well, affirmations are really good because affirmations dig into the part of you that recognizes superconscious truth or divine mind self or higher self truth. And so when you say an affirmation such as, I am whole and perfect and well, my relationships are divinely appointed and manifest love and harmony. I enjoy the prosperity of the universe. I know that God has created an abundant universe and I am abundant in it. All my needs are taken care of when I need them. All is well. All things are working together for good. And as you make a statement like that, it resonates. It cuts a pipeline through your subconscious to the place deep inside you where the higher truth is. And higher truth always supersedes lower truth. And so you've made a connection with the original pattern of well-being that has temporarily been covered over by the pattern of erroneous thought. So you just have to work from inside out. You can pray as well. You can do things that raise your frequency, like walk in the woods and play with your dog and do yoga and read nice books and watch nice videos. Because anything that gets you vibrating at a higher frequency will change your internal pattern. And from that internal pattern shift, you will start to attract different external patterns. It's all attraction. You do not create in the outer world, you attract. This is why so many people are interested in the law of attraction, because as you reconfigure what's going on in here, then the pattern of attraction changes and different things literally show up that would not have shown up if you were in the original pattern. Get it? It makes sense, doesn't it? I coach a lot of people, and I can't tell you the number of people who asked me, will you please coach my husband? And I tell them, well, if your husband wants coaching, then I'm happy to talk to him. But I won't coach him just because you want me to. And what that person is really saying, to kind of peel away the presentation, is my husband is not behaving in a way that makes me happy, so I would like you to fix him so I can feel better about what I'm observing, which is understandable but egotistical, because you're attempting to manipulate the outer world, especially another person. It's one thing to manipulate a flower or a car, but to seek to manipulate another person so they'll make you happier it's kind of out of integrity, and it's fruitless. And so now in coaching, I teach my coach trainees that whenever a client wants to make the subject of the coaching session someone else, it's pretty much a distraction of from their own process. So, how can I get my kid to get better grades? How can I get my husband to take out the garbage? How can I get my boss to be nicer to me? How can I get my boss to listen to me? Well, those are all valid questions, but they're all distractions from what is going on inside you that is worried about your kid getting better grades. Why do you need him to get better grades? Maybe he needs to be an artist instead of an academician. We had a Japanese client who came to me and he said, my 16-year-old daughter is not doing well in school. And my wife and I are very concerned, and we have a lot of fights in the house about it. And I asked, what does your daughter like to do? He said, oh, she loves to airbrush. She airbrushes T-shirts. And he pulled out his phone and he showed me a photo of one of her teachers, and I was blown away. It was super gorgeous and super professional and super talented. I said, this girl is not cut out to be an academic student. She's an artist. And no wonder she's not doing well in school, because she wants to do her art. I suggested he encourage her to do her art and quit beating her up for not, mentally and emotionally for not doing well in school. And he got it. He said, okay. And he talked to his wife, and they changed their position. He said, everything in their house changes. She was actually doing a little better in school, but she was pursuing her art. And he brought her to one of my programs. And she was wearing a T-shirt, and she hugged me and thanked me. I was her savior. But, I didn't save her. But I gave a suggestion that really created a lot more harmony. So the idea of how can I change my daughter so she will live up to my expectations was flawed, because he was basically coming from fear. And the Japanese have a very high pressure on academic excellence, which is good, but not if it applies to somebody who's not academic. And so it was his issue and his wife's issue more than the child's. So once again, the work was not on somebody else, the work was on themselves. And if you're honest too, you'll admit that when something bugs you out there, it's really something bugging you in here. That's the truth about it, isn't it? And Jesus gave the metaphor. He said, why do you say to your friend, let me take the speck out of your eye, when you have a log in your own eye? I mean, how he just summed up all of modern psychology in that one little question. And so the world is a huge distraction. It all seems to be going out there when it's really going on in here. And this is why you can create very little social change from a position of victim or anger. Martin Luther King summed it up most profoundly. He said, you have very little morally persuasive power with someone who feels your underlying contempt. Wow. Let me say that again. You have very little morally persuasive power with someone who feels your underlying contempt. So if you want to make a social change and you're hating and bucking and demeaning and fighting and angsting and angering against somebody, in that moment you have become severely distracted from your work, which is to look inside yourself and say, why do I feel so vulnerable? And why do I allow this person to have power over me? Now, there's certainly ways to make social change without being so upset. And this is what Martin Luther King did. This is why he was successful with civil rights. This is what Mahatma Gandhi did. He had a nonviolent revolution that freed the entire nation of India from British rule without violence, because he did not hate the British. King did not hate white people. He was embracing all. He wanted to, he was going for a goal instead of pushing away from what he didn't want. You understand? This is the whole crux of this difference. Instead of being angry and pushing away what you don't want, you acknowledge what you don't want, and then you go full steam ahead to create what you do want instead. And this is why when Mother Teresa was invited to speak at an anti-war rally, she said, "I will not come, thank you, because being against war is another form of war. Anytime you fight something, you make more of it. If this were a pro-peace rally, I would come, because I don't stand against war, I stand for peace." And this is a huge difference. This is the difference between people who create real social change and people who just keep the wheel of karma spinning and attack, defense, attack, defense, attack, defense. You have to, at some point, rise above it. There's a beautiful section in the Course in Miracles called Above the Battleground. Above the battleground. And at a time on a planet when there's so much dissension and divisiveness and fear, it's only the people who will rise above the battleground and have the greater consciousness of embracing all and working toward what we want instead of fighting what we don't want. Those are the ones who will make the change. Same thing in your relationship. Instead of fighting what your husband's doing that you don't like, reward what he does like. When he instead of complaining that he doesn't mow the lawn, when he does mow the lawn, thank him profusely. Love it. Well, great job. Well, let me just put my feet on the lawn. I feel so good after you mowed it. So it's all about rewarding the positive result instead of punishing the negative result. Punishment doesn't work. It's a very old paradigm, but holding the vision of where you want to end up and living in that vision even before you see it manifested, that's the highest form of social change. Claiming the result even before it's apparent to the physical eyes. Someone once said it's easier to conquer a city than to conquer yourself. And we all know people who are successful politicians or successful leaders, corporate leaders, business leaders, and their lives are a mess. They have dysfunctions, they have horrible marriages, they have addictions, they have greed, they have out of integrity. So they may have conquered the business, they may have conquered the city. That's easy. But to go within and face your fears and tell the truth about where you're hurting, and to confront your marriage partner about the issues you're feeling and being honest about what's going on inside you, and to be real in the face of a community and a world that is living in illusion, that's that's a form of mastery. And then you create real change. One of my favorite quotes is from Thoreau, who said, "There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil for every one who is striking at its root." So I say it again, I love it. There are 1,000 people hacking at the branches of evil for everyone who is striking at the root. So the branches of evil are all the things that people do out of fear and unconsciousness and anger and resistance and smallness and victimhood. Those are the branches of evil. If you drop into that mentality, you become another branch of evil. See, you're just joining the crowd. But if you can go deep, take the deep dive, and confront yourself and sit with yourself and look yourself in the mirror and look yourself in the eye and say, where am I hurting and where am I fearing and where is my upset? And what can I do to shift my heart and open my mind and Jesus said, you are the light of the world. Don't cover the light with a basket. And so my only job is to be the light of the world. And as I come from the light that I am, I will automatically know what to do in the outside world to create social change. And I will lift everybody who looks upon me and inspire them to change for the positive, because they see a model of healing and well-being that is virtually absent everywhere else they look. I want to close with a quote from Rumi, who said, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself." Thank you for listening. I sure love you. We'll see you next week.